Hello everybody, welcome into the season recap here on the Telegram Basketball Insiders. Josh Walfish, joined as always by Foster Lander and Foster. We'll start in the Big East. We'll start with the girls. Nash Central obviously advancing the furthest. Were the Bulldogs actually the best team in the Big East this year though?
I think so. Over a 10-game schedule, you play everybody twice, home and away, and to be able to go 9-1. To me, the most balanced team. Could always be somebody different every night versus somebody like Rocky Mount High, where if Kiana Spivey wasn't going, if Michelle Gainey wasn't hitting threes, then they were a little bit easier to beat. But to me, the most balanced team was Nash Central.
Definitely look at they're going to return their top three scorers: Robbie Allen, Michaela Nelms, Maya Spivey. All three of them will return, but there are going to be questions on the front line. They lose Rebecca Spite, they lose Carisha Leonard. Both of them had massive senior years for Nash Central, so they can find somebody who can fill in that sort of front court area, give them a little bit of rebounding, give them a little bit of defense against some of the taller players that they're going to face. Yeah, I like their chances at maybe repeating this next year. You mentioned the Griffons. Probably, I think, the most frustrating of our area teams to watch girls basketball-wise, because you look at them in the Christmas tournament and they were just sensational. You look at them in the Big East tournament, they were just sensational. The Big East conference season, not so much. What was working for them in tournament play that wasn't working for them in actual regular season?
Well, it started in that Nash Central game, their first game of that tournament, where they hit a bunch of threes. I got out to a 19-0 lead in the first quarter there. To me, it seemed like whenever they were starting games hot, and they did that a lot towards the end of the year, that was when they were at their best.
Definitely. We saw even the Christmas tournament, they got off to a massive lead at Nash Central. And of course, there's Northern Nash, the team that I think you and I both agree, great defense, great structural defense. They're going to stop teams. They just couldn't score the basketball, and that really hurt them, particularly in the second round when they lost to Terry Sanford. They played great defense. They're upset. They were tied at 17 at halftime, the exact type of game the Knights really wanted. And then Terry Sanford scores 20 points in the third quarter and kind of just blows everything open.
And to me, they just didn't have enough scoring outside of Jaliyah Williams. And Jaliyah did all she could, but on the nights when maybe she wasn't hitting as many shots as she usually did, there just wasn't enough outside of her to really keep them in some of those games.
And of course, there was Southern Nash who struggled through another difficult season. And, there's something about the Lady Birds that I really appreciate, which is that they came out and they fought. And they gave it their all every single night. And a lot of teams, and I saw this with Nash Central football, when they had their big losing streak, where it got to a point where losing really kind of got to them a little bit. And it's not that they weren't trying hard, but you could just tell that they were almost resigned to losing. That was never really the case with Southern Nash. They thought every time they hit the court that they had a chance to win. Mm-hmm. And whether we believe that or not from the outside, the fact that they believed that and they believed it throughout the entirety of the season, I think is something for the girls, to be really proud of, because as we mentioned, not the most talented team necessarily, but certainly a team that gave it their all. And I, as somebody that wasn't always the most athletic person on the field, I could certainly appreciate that.
Me too.
But yeah, I'll spare you the Edgecombe County schools, because I know you're not really as strong. North Edgecombe, a team that had a lot of senior leadership. Curious to see what's going to happen to them next year when they get some of the younger players. Opposed to that, Tarbo made the playoffs, which I think is a major improvement, a major goal for them, considering they only had one senior, I think, on their team. So most of this core is coming back. They can build off this experience looking forward. And Southwest Edgecombe, they got their home playoff game, finishing second in the conference. They won that. They went to East Bladen. They were competitive for a little bit until East Bladen rallied off 30 straight points or something in the third quarter to blow that game open. But they're also a team that doesn't lose a lot in terms of seniors. A lot of their core players are sophomores or juniors, so they're really primed for a big season next year if they stay and play consistent. That was a big issue this year. They had so many three-year starters, and they just weren't very consistent. If they could be consistent in their senior year, realize that, okay, this is my last season playing high school basketball, they could be a dangerous threat. We'll move to the boys. We'll start outside of the NCHSAA. We'll start Rocky Mount Academy. Losing in the conference tournament final, getting blown out in the first round of the state playoffs. How would you evaluate the Eagles season this year?
Yeah, the end to that season was kind of strange for them, given that when I'd seen them kind of late in the year, they had started to play more consistently. They had started to play better in first and second quarters, and and kind of jump on teams early. So it kind of felt like, talking to Aubrey Mitchell and Elijah McAdam, that they felt like they were starting to play their best basketball late in the year, and then it ends the way it does. But Elijah McAdam, just a sophomore this year, already got a couple of Division I offers, and hearing from some ACC and SEC schools that he'll be really intriguing to watch over the next 2 years.
I know Scott Dunn is hoping that none of those nice private schools in Raleigh lure Elijah McCann away. We'll start actually in Edgecombe County. Charborough finished third in the Two Rivers. I know they are very disappointed by that because they felt like they had a chance to actually win the conference. And not only that, they got blown out in their second game of the Two Rivers Conference tournament to Riverside. They went to Riverside again to play in the first round, and they kept it a little bit competitive, but never really had a chance late to beat Riverside. I know that's disappointing for them.
Four losses to Riverside this year alone.
Yeah, and the
They're
first,
even close.
I would say the first two were, I think, by a combined 4 points. They lose by 20. They lose by like 10, I believe, in the first round. So the Vikings, they had a couple of seniors, Rasheed Herring being the main one of those. So curious to see how they look next year. North Edgecombe had a lot of seniors, but they never really just got things going. Rockingham Prep beat them. Rockingham Prep only finished with 4 wins, thanks to Coach of the Year, Charlie Manning, finishing 5th there. So I'm curious to see how those 3 programs look coming up in the future. Southwest Edgecombe, probably the biggest disappointment in the sense that they had so much talent, and we saw in the first round. They went to Fairmont, and they just dominated that game in the first half. And they couldn't pull away. They almost come back and pull off an upset, but couldn't really get it done. And we move to the Big East finally, because I know I'm getting it's time to wrap it up. Quickly, Northern Nash, disappointment of a year?
I think so, and it's one of those where they could have won 5 or 6 games in that conference probably, and instead they go 2-8. So it's hard to say that any Big East regular season is a total disappointment because it's always so tightly packed. But some good players maybe didn't get as much out of Darius Spragley scoring-wise as we thought they might, having seen them in non-conference. But in the end, probably not what they would have wanted this year.
And then Nash Central. Surprise, disappointment. How would you evaluate the season?
For me, they were probably the most fun boys team to watch around here, which is strange to say, but the scoring was kind of inconsistent with some of those guys, and the way they ended the season, just not great. Had a chance to wrap up the regular season title and the number 1 seed in the conference tournament on the last day of the regular season, and couldn't get it done.
I mean, they lost to Hunt in overtime by 2. They lost to Southern Nash in overtime by 1. They win either of those 2 games to the top seed. They get a home game in the playoffs. Instead, they have to go on the road and talk with Montre Cash. He's like, they watched our film and they scouted us perfectly. They guarded Josh, but more importantly, they guarded Elijah Cole. And they basically said, you two aren't going to score, everybody else score. And that's the way to beat Nash Central. On the flip side, Southern Nash, a lot of seniors. They get their conference championship finally after 18 long years, but they lose in the 3rd round to Eastern Alamance. Is that a good season for them? It could have been better. How would you evaluate the Firebirds?
I think that was probably the ceiling for them. I mean, Eastern Alamance 28-1 when Southern Nash went on the road, the top seed in the 3A East bracket. So that was probably where it was going to end all along. But they got fortunate to get that number 1 seed in the conference tournament on the draw, and managed to win a couple close, tough games in that conference tournament and win it. So I have to think that Robbie Kennedy is pleased with the way that season ended up.
I honestly think that the coach most pleased with the way this season ended is Mike Gainey. I mean, you look at this. I mean, the Griffons were left for dead at the Christmas tournament. They looked not competitive. They looked out of sorts and all that. And to think that we're talking 2 months later about them winning a share of the Big East regular season, hosting a playoff game, and losing to a good team in Cedar Ridge by only 4 points at home. Like, they ended that season with a lot of momentum.
And to think that when I saw them, it was the first or second game of the Big East season, and they go to Nash Central and lose by 34 on that Friday night, and they just got killed. I mean, there was no chance for them in that game. And they didn't even really look like they had any players that could help them win games or even score in the Big East. So I was thinking that it might be a 1-9 or 0-10 season for them. And for them to come back is a pretty big accomplishment.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in all season long to our basketball coverage. We'll be back sporadically in the spring to keep you updated with baseball and softball. But for the most part, you'll get your weekly videos back in August when it's football season.